It's a question that's probably crossed your mind, right? Maybe you're just scrolling through your news feed, seeing all these unsettling headlines. It is a heavy one, and it's exactly what we're going to tackle in this explainer. Are we actually in World War III? Let's dive in.
So there's the question, big and bold. It might seem simple, but the answer is, well, it's anything but. That feeling of anxiety you have about the state of the world, it's not just you. It is a totally normal response to a world that feels like it's constantly on a knife's edge. So let's really break down what's going on here.
And this is why everyone's feeling that anxiety. When you look at this list, you're not seeing a bunch of disconnected conflicts. No, you're looking at a web, a really complicated one. You've major world powers and, wow, dozens of other nations all involved, either directly or through proxies across multiple fronts at the exact same time. The scale of how interconnected all this is, it's just staggering. Okay, so that brings us to our first section here, a world on edge. Because this feeling, this sense that we're on the brink of something huge, it isn't just paranoia. It is absolutely rooted in a very real and honestly, a very dramatic shift in how the world works. This quote really just hits the nail on the head, doesn't it? It perfectly captures the kind of whiplash we're all feeling. I mean, think about it. We've gone from an era that felt full of unprecedented optimism to one with escalating global danger in just a few decades. So let's take a quick look back to understand how we got to this point in a section we're calling the end of peace. Because to really get a handle on the tension of today, we got to remember the dream we all thought we were building not that long ago. Back in 1989, right as the Berlin Wall was coming down, this was the big idea. A famous political scientist, Francis Fukuyama, argued that the great ideological battles, they were over, done. Humanity, he said, had basically found its final ideal form of government. The future felt kinda settled. And that promised future, it was supposed to be, well, almost boring in a good way. A world where nations were driven by economic calculations, not by conquest and ideology. A world where our biggest challenges were going to be technical problems and just meeting consumer demands. And then you see a quote like this. Wow, this jarring leap from the promise of the end of history to these stark warnings about sleepwalking into the abyss. It just makes you ask, what on earth happened? Okay, that brings us to the World War checklist. Let's get a little analytical here and see if what's happening today actually fits the historical definition of a world war. All right, so defense experts often define a classic world war using 4 key ingredients. First, you need multiple great powers on both sides. We're talking the heavy hitters like the US, China, Russia. Second, the conflict has to be happening across multiple continents. And third, this is the really crucial one, those great powers have to be fighting each other directly. So if we hold up today's global situation against that list, multiple great powers on opposing sides? Yep, check. A conflict spanning multiple continents? Absolutely, check. But that third part, great powers in direct military conflict, by that classic definition, we are not there. That's the big, crucial missing piece of the puzzle. But this right here, this is the twist. This thought comes from the very Reddit discussion that got us started on this whole thing. And it's a huge point. What if the old definitions just don't apply anymore? What if the very nature of war has changed so much that we need a new definition for what a world war looks like in the 21st century? And that question leads us right into our next section, a new kind of war. This is where we're going to explore how conflict has moved way beyond the traditional battlefield and into a space that, well, we all live in every single day. So check this out. This cycle of escalation, it starts somewhere we all know very well, online. A piece of viral misinformation. It could be a convincing deepfake or a totally made-up news story, just explodes on social media. This manufactured outrage then gets used to create real political tension. Governments might even pour gas on the fire with their own propaganda, which leads to diplomatic breakdowns, cyber attacks, and, eventually, the very real risk of physical conflict. A tweet can now literally become a trigger. And there's actually a name for this new theater of operations. It's called the information battlespace. It's basically a conflict zone where the main weapons aren't just bombs and bullets, but tweets, memes, and viral videos, all designed so carefully to shape what people think and to achieve strategic goals. And look, this isn't some sci-fi theory. It is happening right now. The war in Ukraine is being fought with tanks and tweets, missiles and memes, where a powerful meme can sometimes be as effective as a battlefield maneuver. In the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, viral videos and images instantly sway global opinion, which creates real diplomatic pressure. And groups like ISIS showed everyone how social media can be an incredibly powerful tool for recruiting people and raising money from all over the world. The front lines are now officially digital.
All of this brings us to our final and maybe most important section, the information battlefield, where we can see how this new way of fighting is completely reshaping global conflict as we know it.
So modern conflict doesn't look like a neat battle plan anymore. It looks more like this tangled, complicated web. New media is like the connective tissue that links everything. State-run news narratives with targeted cyber attacks. It fuels political division with fake news campaigns, which are really just a form of psychological operation. It's this total fusion of tactics where telling the difference between a civilian and a military target, or even between peacetime and wartime, becomes incredibly, incredibly difficult. So the biggest takeaway here is this. The arsenal for modern war has gotten way bigger. Just like strategists were predicting decades ago, future conflicts aren't going to be just military. They are technological, they are economic, and they are informational. This brings us back to a really haunting thought from that online discussion. The writer warns that if we're all just waiting for some big, clear Hollywood movie moment, those thousands of new suns, to tell us that World War III has started, we might realize it way, way too late. And so we're left with this really unsettling final question. Maybe we've been looking for the wrong signs this whole time, for troop movements and formal declarations of war, when the conflict has already kicked off in the one place we all look every single day. So, how do you recognize a world war when the battlefield is your screen?